Warm greetings, everyone. My name is Professor Resh. I'm delighted to be able to give a talk centered around human-centered AI education. Before I go any further, there are two important things I would like to note. First, I apologize profusely as I'm not feeling very well with my autoimmune disorder flare up, and therefore I am going to pre-record this presentation, and I'm confident that Dr. Munir Moosa will play it in the symposium. And second of all, I would like to also take a moment, a genuine moment, to acknowledge the First Nations people who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm meeting today in a virtual format. I want to pay homage to their ways of life, to their ontology and epistemology, and be guided by them on how I can support them in a way that's culturally informed and culturally sensitive. Like to also extend that respect to any First Nations people who are in this symposium today. Thank you. I'll give you a very quick overview of my bio. I think it's really important for us to know who I am and what is my background in education. I'm very delighted to say that I'm an honorary professor with GFT since 2021. And I thank Dr. Moosa, who's my ultimate mentor, role model, and also a very close brother to me. He has been influential in my life in so many ways. I'm based in Australia, Brisbane, Queensland, where I hold the title of a senior lecturer and course coordinator in the counseling discipline at ACAP University College. I'm also a registered health practitioner working in the scope of a senior developmental educator, a senior behavior practitioner, and also a counselor. I'm also very much involved in research, peer reviewing, and also sit on a few journals as an editor. Very fond of helping humans and animals and being of service to them, which really aligns with my life calling and pathway. And also recently, I've also established a international community-driven organization called Hearts Without Borders, which has been initiated through my involvement with GFTE, where I support various causes. And one of the most important causes to me is to help children in Pakistan through Dr. Munir Moosa's help and support and raise funds for them. This presentation is far from comprehensive, but it does do one thing quite well. It provides a baseline understanding on how AI can be enacted in education in a very contextual, nuanced, and most importantly, humanizing way. So let's talk about what exactly is human-centered AI. But before we do that, though, let's take a moment to reflect on how AI has influenced our life. When I got to know about AI, I would say it's post-COVID-19, with COVID-19, the pandemic, that in itself was devastating and very, very hard to grapple with. And then AI comes into action. And over time, I've also sat with my own experiences and emotions and how AI has influenced my actions, behaviors, or how it's actually working alongside me in various professional and personal capacities. And reflecting on that, and of course, this is very much based on my personal anecdotes. I would actually categorize AI into three phases. And I've often seen this also align with other people's experiences. The first phase was based on fear and resistance. And let me tell you something. When AI was introduced to me, I just went, yuck, no bloody way. I'm not engaging in AI. That's unethical. I was very, very, I would say, black and white in my thinking at that time. And weeks went by, months went by. I thought, I'm seeing this now used in education in various contexts. So I had, I was almost forced into it where I had to go and experiment it. So an example was when students were caught using AI in unethical ways or in unknowing ways, I had to go and do some investigation. And that prompted me to engage in a series of things like trialing different commands and prompts in AI, like ChatGPT, Copilot, and various other forms. So phase one was fear and resistance. Phase two, to me, was cautious experimentation, where there was some resistance and some fragilities and some ambivalence, but equally, I was getting excited. I was being illuminated and enlightened on different processes that AI can do. I would say now the third phase would be the integration phase. So we've moved from fear, resistance, to cautious experimentation, to now integration. Why integration? And I suppose the bulk of this talk is focused on AI integration phase. Let's be frank and candid here. AI is everywhere. And I must say, whilst I'm saying to you that I was introduced to AI recently post COVID-19, I drive German cars. Lots of German cars are very AI savvy. They're very, very sort of AI informed in terms of technology with safety and those types of things. So really, I was already an AI user, but through a different form and context, you see. So AI is everywhere now, especially in education settings. So I think it's important for us to acknowledge, not resist, but work with it to understand how it can be used in a transparent and ethical manner. So this is where human-centered AI is so important. Why? Because we're not talking about replacing human beings, even though there are jobs out there that has done precisely that, which is very disappointing. And also, I'm cognizant that with lots of global trends and also with rising costs, those things can offer some benefits. But within education, though, I am confident that AI is going to be very difficult. AI will be very difficult to replace or to substitute human judgment and involvement. So human-centered AI really focuses on the humanistic elements around AI use, okay? And whilst also acknowledging that AI can potentially yield many benefits, but the human factor is going to be a core tenet in how we use AI, how we engage AI, and how we support AI usage across the education context. So let's go into this a bit more deeper now, shall we? Let's look at the current landscape and some opportunities in AI use within the education context. So, as I mentioned earlier, education is fundamentally human-centered, okay? Let's just stop there and ponder on that statement further. Education is fundamentally human-centered, okay? When lecturers and students engage in learning, it's often bidirectional. I'm not saying AI can't do that, but there's something special um, and unique about human connection, which AI often cannot provide. The depth of human relationships. And teachers and students both have important roles to play here. Okay. Um, so in education systems, where there are human beings, and I talked about that notion of bidirectional learning, where teachers and students are engaging in that reciprocal interaction, where I know in some countries, teachers are seen as superior to students. In Australia, it's a lot different. We are on the same level. Teachers and students are equal. We have different experience and expertise, and we work together as a collective. We share, we learn together, and we also learn through, just learning through sharing of knowledge, truly. That's really, really important there. And we want to also honor AI, but do it in a way that does not compromise or diminish human relationships and humanity, period. Let's go further. So, what are some current uses? Now, I've seen AI use in education within my workplace in various settings. I suppose some examples are outlined in the PowerPoint slide. Personal learning. It's not just personal learning, it's more about students being supported in a way that's quite boundaried and scaffolded. That can be very useful. Now, I don't know about you, I'm autistic. I cannot stand ambiguity or when communication is quite convoluted. So often I would put an email from a colleague or from a student, which might be a bit vague or not so clear, into these AI systems and ask it to give me feedback on ways to respond to the email communication. Now, that's not replacing my role, but it's giving me insights into an email communication that lacks clarity. That's an example. I've often encouraged students to use AI to support their own development. Perhaps in giving them more confidence, they could potentially sit down and map out their thoughts in terms of how they would like to tackle an assessment and ask AI to give the student potentially some additional tips or even endorse that their thinking is appropriate. AI is no different to Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, where when a learner is motivated and made to feel competent, there is a much higher chance for them to perform the task more effectively. That's really it. Giving feedback, as I mentioned earlier, it provides useful feedback, feedback in a way that can facilitate lifelong learning and development. Administrative tasks can be, removed almost entirely. I have found it to be very useful in terms of doing calculations for me with various report writings, even grading, getting it to do the, the grade distributions. Those types of things can be very useful. Now, of course, with all of this, and I'll talk about that shortly, everything that is inserted into AI also goes through an audit and review by me before it's confirmed as legitimate. I hope that's clear to all of you. So even with feedback from assessments, feedback about assessments, I often tell my students, listen, get the feedback, and then sit with the feedback, review it, and see if it's accurate and consistent with the assessment requirements and your own thought processes. Do not take it explicitly and literally and apply it in your assessments. And this is where I'll talk a bit more about ways to combat or address it. So again, reiterating the same statement here, it's not overriding human judgment, but it is complementing human judgment and human efficiency in a world that's very, very saturated by continual and ongoing demands on a given day. Let's look at the risk and benefits. So things I've already mentioned here, but a big one I will talk about here is accessibility. Now, as I mentioned to you all earlier, as an autistic person, I've used AI in ways to support and maximize my autistic capacity without feeling like I'm incompetent or incapable. So that is something I have personally witnessed. I have got first-hand experiences of students who are using AI and their capacity has augmented exponentially. Voila, brilliant. Also helps in terms of getting students to really find a way that, that they can use AI in a way that's meaningful to their learning portfolio and needs. So one of the things I've also learned is the more AI interacts with you and vice versa, the more it starts to map out the way you think, the way you do, the way you think, the way you write stuff. And also you can, give it examples of your work so it can then talk to you in a way that's coherent and consistent with your communication and learning portfolio and style. So those things can be very, very useful. And also I would say it can also take away the burden and stress from teachers who are already time poor. I've noticed every year my workload increases a lot. It gets bigger and bigger. While the pay salary doesn't increase as much, the workload gets bigger and bigger. And sometimes it's impossible to do all that work and provide that individualized support. So AI can also be seen as streamlining supports where students can be invited to go to AI and use it as a starting point and then come back to the lecturer with some questions to further guide their learning supports. So I must say it can be very useful for educators in that stance. One of the other examples I've also noticed from my own experience is the compassion fatigue, where I'm a person-centered lecturer. I put so much of myself and I give too much of myself to students at the expense of my own health and well-being. Working 14-hour days is not humanly possible. This is where AI can be useful, where I might tell my students, if there's something you're unclear about the lecture and the course structure or the course requirements, ask AI first to give you some assistance. And if you're unclear, then come back to me. And that has lessened my workload in that sense, so I can focus and prioritize on much more important and significant tasks. With any systems, there's going to always be risk, okay? Some examples are outlined in this PowerPoint slide here. I think one of the biggest issues is data breaches and privacy and confidentiality breaches. So I don't know, I suppose, how this works in different countries, but in Australia, if you pay to use AI, the data is secure and it's safe within the user. So there's also ways where you can actually, if it's an unpaid version, you could also turn off the chat history also use this mode called temporary mode, which then allows you to engage with AI, but still not store your information or use your information for future AI training models. So those things are really important here. Recently I was talking to my student who's doing an honors project, and I've invited them to use AI to help with their proofreading and also their expression to further improve its clarity. And we've established that they use Microsoft Pilot, which is a system that is paid by the university. And students are given an account to use Microsoft Copilot for that very purpose, where they can engage with Copilot to refine their thesis and make it sound better, so it's more legible to the examiner and to the person who's doing the research as well. So that's a good example of how we can mitigate some of that risk and challenges. I've also seen educators, as mentioned earlier, being very time poor, also becoming very reliant on AI. I've noticed a few themes emerging from that phenomenon: learned helplessness, laziness, and unethical use of AI, where they are using AI to create lecture slides, and AI doesn't always get it right. And they are just using that material to develop lecture slides without checking the content for accuracy or verifying the citations, because AI has been known to fabricate citations as well, and to fabricate and falsify content, my darlings. So those things must be always, be watched and carefully managed as well. One of the other things is there's so much of fear, as I mentioned earlier, with phase one of AI use. For some people, they're still in phase one. Oh, it's a no-no. Oh, if I use it, I'll be seen as plagiarizing or colluding. Well, no, unless you use it in immoral ways. And this is where it's important to support students, which I'll talk about in the next coming slides, in terms of how can we promote students to use AI in a transparent and ethical and human-centered manner without making them feel that they might be punished or there might be a disciplinary action being deployed. So let's look at ways we can support that. So I think a big one for me is AI literacy. Now, I'm a mental health practitioner. I talk in abundance about mental health literacy. There's also AI literacy. So let's move away from being punitive and let's move to a perspective which embraces AI in a strength-based way. With that strength-based perspective, let's also humanize it. Okay? Let's teach students, and this can vary dependently, but I'd invite you all to be very explicit in your instructions and educational training in terms of which programs you can use. How can you use those programs to support your learning? What can you do? What can't you do? Make that explicitly clear. I have not seen these aspects clearly articulated in many universities. They may say one and they may not say the other. And this is where people then find themselves in grief. Oh my God, I've done the wrong thing. Most AI misuse is often unintentional. I'll be very clear about that. I've seen that a lot in my own workplace with students. They're not intending to copy and plagiarize, but they are unaware what constitutes plagiarism and what constitutes ethical usage, and they then find themselves in big trouble. So teach them explicitly, teach the students explicitly what that looks like in application in a more pragmatic and real life format. The other one, of course, with assignments, for us, we need to be very careful in terms of AI can be used to complete assessments. So what do we do about that? So we need to also think more creatively in how we get students to engage in assessments. A bad example is lit reviews. Literature reviews are very AI prone. AI can very easily put together a lit review based on a topic. And students who are more like writing savvy or proficient in writing can literally paraphrase the whole report and then claim it as theirs. This is where often I find reflective components can be integrated into AI prone assessments to make the assessments more secure. Or you might get a student, for example, in your class to give them a video with some timestamps and get them to watch the video and reflect on that video. Now, even though AI can do that as well, I often find when students are invited to engage in reflection that aligns with a few things: personal learning, professional learning, and work integrated learning, they are more likely to be motivated and more likely to be seen to engage with AI in a more ethical way. When students are demotivated, don't see much purpose or relevance to what what the assessment is going to give them back, that's when we often find students going into the AI realms. So find a way, and there are no clear answers to this. Find a way where AI can be integrated whilst also motivating the student, okay, to pursue their assessments and course materials in a way that liberates them, that emancipates them. That is important for us to consider. So just a few other comments here as well. One of the things I suppose I want to really emphasize here is that AI can do many things, okay? AI can do many things. It can also really augment a person's capacity. We need to be very clear as well in terms of the ethical use behind AI. And this is where, going back to the previous slide, where we need to really emphasize how ethics is deployed within AI-centered programs, where the human element is continually preserved, sustained, maintained. That must be the focal point here. So let's look at some take-home messages. So going back to my previous comment, the future is AI. Let's just acknowledge that, okay? Or AI is our future. And teachers and students must be clearly informed and empowered in how they use AI, or if they choose to use AI without being punitive about the whole thing. And if a student or a teacher wants to take part or participate in AI programs to further enhance their capacity, they must always center their work and their engagement in ethics. It must be transparent, it must be ethical, and it must also be deeply human. AI is not replacing human beings, even though it can sometimes feel that way, it's augmenting and elevating a human's capacity. So that's the most important part in how we approach AI within the education context. And just to also conclude, before I conclude the presentation, I want to remind all of you, I've got an amazing professional development session coming up on how to conduct sensory audits. It's on the 16th of February, and it's based Sydney time, 7 to 9 p.m. It's an introductory course on how to conduct sensory audit to support people with sensory sensitivities. So if you're interested, it is a paid professional developmental training. If you're interested, I invite you to speak to the founder of this company called Suzanne Bocking, and her email is attached at the bottom there. Send her an email, and then she will send you an invite to the event. As I come to a close, I want to say a huge, huge thank you and appreciation to the one and only Dr. Professor Munir Moosa. And whilst I'm not present there live in the symposium today, I want to thank him for this wonderful opportunity in always giving me the time and space to come and share things that matter to me very much, like this topic here. I want to also acknowledge his hard work and the humanity that comes from him in whatever he does to elevate other people around the globe. So thank you, Professor Munir, and my dear brother. And for those of you who want to stay in touch with me, here's my email address and also my Instagram account as well. Thank you all, and may you all be blessed.